Sarah Martinez clutched her swollen belly as another sharp pain coursed through her body. The fluorescent lights of Riverside General Hospital's emergency department buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on her pale face. She had been sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair for nearly 2 hours, watching other patients come and go while her contractions grew stronger and more frequent. Mrs. Martinez? A tired-looking nurse finally called her name from behind the reception desk. Sarah struggled to her feet, her hand pressed against the small of her back. At 36 weeks pregnant with twins, every movement had become a monumental effort. "I think I'm in labor," Sarah said breathlessly as she approached the desk. "The contractions are about 5 minutes apart now, and they're getting really intense." The nurse, whose name tag read Linda, looked up from her computer screen with practiced efficiency. "First pregnancy?" "Yes, and it's twins," Sarah replied, wincing as another contraction began to build. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white as the pain peaked, and then slowly subsided. Linda's expression shifted to one of greater concern. "Let's get you into a wheelchair and up to the maternity ward right away. Twin deliveries can move quickly, especially if this is early labor." As Linda wheeled her toward the elevator, Sarah felt a wave of panic wash over her. She was alone. Her husband Marcus was stuck in Denver due to a delayed flight, desperately trying to get back for the birth of their children. Her mother lived 3 states away, and her sister was unreachable somewhere in Europe on her honeymoon. The timing couldn't have been worse. "Is there someone we can call for you?" Linda asked as they waited for the elevator to arrive. "My husband is trying to get here from Colorado, but his flight was canceled," Sarah explained, her voice shaky. "He's looking for another one. But with the storm system moving through, I don't know when he'll make it." The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Linda pushed the wheelchair inside. "Don't worry, honey. Our maternity team is excellent. You're in good hands." Sarah nodded, trying to convince herself that everything would be okay. She had planned every detail of this delivery for months. She and Marcus had toured the hospital twice, met with their obstetrician Dr. Williams multiple times, and had a detailed birth plan that included Marcus being her primary support person. None of those plans had accounted for her going into labor 3 weeks early while Marcus was on a business trip. The maternity ward was bustling with activity, even though it was nearly midnight. Linda wheeled Sarah to the nurse's station, where a young woman with kind eyes and curly red hair looked up from a chart. "This is Sarah Martinez, 36 weeks with twins, contractions 5 minutes apart," Linda reported. "I'm Kelly, one of the night nurses," the red-haired woman said with a warm smile. "Let's get you into a room and have someone take a look at you." Room 314 was painted in soft pastels with a large window overlooking the hospital's garden. Under different circumstances, Sarah might have found it peaceful. Kelly helped her change into a hospital gown and get settled in the bed, attaching monitors to track the baby's heartbeats and her contractions. "The monitors show that you're definitely in active labor," Kelly said, studying the printout. "Baby A's heartbeat looks strong, and baby B is doing well too. Let me page the on-call physician to come examine you." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to focus on the breathing techniques she had learned in childbirth class. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Visualize the babies moving down and out safely. But it was hard to concentrate when another contraction was building, this one stronger than the last. "Breathe through it," Kelly coached, placing a supportive hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You're doing great." As the contraction peaked, Sarah felt something change. A sudden gush of warm fluid soaked the bed beneath her. "I think my water just broke," she gasped. Kelly quickly lifted the sheet to check. "Yes, it did. And I can see some blood, which isn't unusual, but I'm going to call the doctor right away. Twin deliveries can progress very quickly once the water breaks." Sarah's heart began to race. This was happening so fast. In all her reading about twin pregnancies, she had learned that labor could be unpredictable, but she had somehow convinced herself that she would have more warning, more time to prepare mentally for the actual delivery. Kelly was on the phone at the nurse's station when another nurse, an older woman named Janet, came into the room. "How are we doing in here?" "Not great," Sarah admitted, gripping the bed rails as another contraction hit. "Everything is happening so fast, and my husband isn't here, and I'm scared about delivering twins early. Janet sat down in the chair beside the bed. 36 weeks is actually pretty good for twins. They're considered full-term at 37 weeks, so you're very close. And the doctors here have delivered hundreds of twins. You're going to be just fine. But, as Janet spoke, Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to push. The pressure was intense and seemed to come from nowhere. I need to push, she announced urgently. I really need to push right now. Janet's eyes widened. Hold on, honey. Let me check to see how dilated you are. She quickly examined Sarah, and her expression grew serious. Kelly, she called loudly. We need the doctor in here immediately. She's fully dilated, and I can see the baby's head crowning. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Kelly rushed back into the room, speaking rapidly into her phone. Other nurses appeared as if from nowhere, wheeling in equipment and preparing the room for an emergency delivery. The on-call doctor is scrubbing in now, Kelly announced. Sarah, I need you to try not to push until the doctor gets here. I know it's difficult, but pant through the contractions instead. Sarah tried to follow the instructions, but her body seemed to have taken over. Every instinct screamed at her to push, to help her babies make their way into the world. She could hear urgent voices in the hallway, footsteps running, and the sound of equipment being moved quickly. Where is the doctor? Janet asked Kelly in a low voice, but Sarah could hear the concern in her tone. Scrubbing in. Should be here any second. But, as Sarah felt another massive contraction building, she knew there might not be time to wait. The pressure was becoming unbearable, and she could feel the baby moving down rapidly. I can't wait, she gasped. The baby is coming right now. That's when she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway, the confident stride that she had once known so well. A voice was giving rapid orders to the nursing staff, professional and authoritative. But there was something about the tone, the cadence of speech, that made Sarah's blood run cold even through the haze of labor pains. The patient is fully dilated, doctor. Baby's head is crowning, and we're dealing with twins at 36 weeks, Kelly was saying to someone just outside the door. I'll need the neonatal team standing by in case of complications, came the reply. The voice was deeper now than she remembered, more mature, but unmistakably familiar. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, and not because of the contraction that was building. It couldn't be. Not here, not now, not under these circumstances. The doctor stepped into the room, already wearing surgical gloves and a mask that covered most of his face. But Sarah would have recognized those dark brown eyes anywhere, even after 5 years. Dr. David Chun, her ex-boyfriend, the man she had once planned to marry, was now walking toward her bed with the confidence of someone who had delivered countless babies. Their eyes met over her exposed belly, and she saw a flicker of recognition in his gaze, followed quickly by professional composure. He paused for just a fraction of a second, so briefly that the nurses probably didn't notice, but Sarah caught it. Hello, Sarah, he said quietly, his voice carefully neutral. I'm Dr. Chun, and I'm going to help deliver your babies. Sarah couldn't speak. She was caught between the physical intensity of labor and the emotional shock of seeing David after all these years. This was the man who had broken her heart when he chose his medical residency over their relationship, the man she had cried over for months, the man she had finally moved on from when she met Marcus. Another contraction hit with crushing force, and Sarah had no choice but to focus on the immediate situation. The personal history would have to wait. Right now, she needed David's medical expertise to safely deliver her children. I need to push, she said through gritted teeth. David moved to the foot of the bed, all business now. Okay, Sarah. With the next contraction, I want you to take a deep breath and push down into your bottom, like you're having a bowel movement. Count to 10, then take another breath and push again. As the contraction built, Sarah did as he instructed. The pressure was incredible, but she could feel progress being made. The baby was moving down. Great job, David encouraged. I can see the head. The baby has dark hair. One more good push should do it. Sarah bore down with everything she had, and suddenly felt a rush of relief as the baby's head emerged completely. Beautiful, David said, gently supporting the tiny head. The cord isn't around the neck, which is good. Now we need to deliver the shoulders. This might feel strange, but try to push gently. With the next contraction, Sarah pushed again, and suddenly, David was lifting a tiny, slippery baby up for her to see. "It's a boy," he announced, and the baby immediately began crying, a strong, healthy sound that filled the room. Kelly quickly clamped and cut the umbilical cord while David placed the baby on Sarah's chest. Sarah looked down at her son in amazement. He was smaller than she had expected, but his cries were robust, and his color was good. For a moment, she forgot everything else and just marveled at the miracle of this tiny person who had been growing inside her for 8 months. "He's beautiful," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. But the moment of euphoria was brief. David was already preparing for the delivery of the second twin. "Baby B is in a good position," he said, pressing gently on Sarah's belly to feel the baby's placement. "We should be able to deliver vaginally, but I'm going to monitor closely. Sometimes the second twin can turn or shift position after the first is born." Kelly took the first baby to the warming table where the neonatal team was waiting to check him over. Sarah felt strangely empty without the weight of his small body on her chest, but she knew he needed immediate medical attention. Another contraction was building, but this one felt different, less intense than the ones that had delivered her first son. "The contractions are spacing out a bit," David observed, checking the monitor. "That's normal. Your body is adjusting to the new space. We'll wait for them to pick up again before we worry about delivering the second baby." Sarah used the lull to really look at David for the first time since he had entered the room. He had aged well in the 5 years since she had last seen him. His black hair was shorter now, more professional, with just a hint of gray at the temples. He had filled out slightly, losing the lanky build of his residency years and developing the broader shoulders of maturity. There were fine lines around his eyes that spoke of long hours and the weight of responsibility that came with being a doctor. "How are you feeling?" he asked, and for a moment his voice was softer, more personal than purely professional. "Scared," Sarah admitted. "I wasn't expecting to do this alone. My husband is supposed to be here, but his flight was canceled." David nodded with understanding. "Twin deliveries can be unpredictable timing-wise, but you're doing incredibly well. Your first son looks healthy and strong, and his APGAR scores are excellent for 36 weeks. There was so much Sarah wanted to ask him, so much history between them that hung unspoken in the air. Where had he ended up doing his residency? Had he specialized in obstetrics because of their conversations years ago about wanting to help bring new life into the world? Was he married? Did he have children of his own? But before she could voice any of these questions, another contraction began, stronger than the last few. "Here we go," David said, resuming his position. "This baby seems eager to meet the world too." The delivery of the second twin was different from the first. The baby seemed larger, and the pushing took longer. Sarah was exhausted from the first delivery, and her energy was flagging. "Come on, Sarah," David coached. "I know you're tired, but we need a few more good pushes. The baby's head is right there." Sarah gathered all her remaining strength and pushed with everything she had. She felt the familiar sensation of the baby's head emerging, followed quickly by the shoulders, and then the rest of the tiny body. "Another boy," David announced, holding up the second twin. This baby took a moment longer to cry, and when he did, his voice was weaker than his brother's had been. Kelly immediately took the second baby to the neonatal team, who began working on him more urgently than they had with the first twin. "Is he okay?" Sarah asked, trying to see what was happening at the warming table. "He's a little smaller than his brother, and his initial breathing was slower, but the team is helping him," David explained, delivering the placentas and beginning to check for any tears that might need stitching. This isn't uncommon with twins, especially when they're a few weeks early. Sarah watched anxiously as the medical team worked on her second son. She could see them providing oxygen and stimulating him to breathe more effectively. The sight of her tiny baby surrounded by medical equipment was terrifying. "He's responding well," one of the neonatal nurses called over. "His color is improving, and his breathing is stabilizing." Relief flooded through Sarah. Both her sons were alive and seemed to be okay. She had delivered twins with her ex-boyfriend as the attending physician, and somehow they had all gotten through it. David finished his examination and began cleaning up. "You did incredibly well, Sarah. Both boys look healthy, considering they're a few weeks early. They'll probably need to spend some time in the NICU for monitoring and to help with feeding, but that's standard for twins at 36 weeks. As the immediate medical crisis passed, the awkwardness of the personal situation began to settle over the room. The nurses were busy with postpartum care and getting the babies ready for transport to the NICU, but Sarah and David found themselves alone at the foot of the bed. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "I know this must have been unexpected for you too." David pulled off his gloves and looked at her directly for the first time since the delivery had begun. "It was, but I'm glad I could be here to help. You were amazing through all of that." There was so much more to say, so many questions and explanations and apologies that had been building up for 5 years. But this wasn't the time or place for those conversations. Sarah had just given birth to twins. Her husband was still trying to get to the hospital, and David was the doctor who had just delivered her children. "Dr. Chun," Kelly interrupted, "the NICU team is ready to transport the babies. Did you want to speak with Mrs. Martinez about the next steps?" "Of course," David replied, immediately shifting back into professional mode. "Sarah, both boys will be taken to the NICU for monitoring. This is precautionary, but important for twins born at 36 weeks. They'll need help with feeding initially, and we'll monitor their breathing, temperature regulation, and blood sugar levels." Sarah nodded, trying to process the information while also dealing with the emotional whirlwind of seeing David again under such intense circumstances. "Can I see them before they go to the NICU?" she asked. "Absolutely." David signaled to the neonatal team, and they brought both warming tables closer to Sarah's bed. Looking at her two sons side by side, Sarah was struck by how different they looked despite being identical twins. The firstborn was slightly larger and had a rounder face, while the second was more delicate with finer features. Both had dark hair and what looked like it would be dark eyes, though it was hard to tell at this early stage. "They're beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch each tiny hand. "Have you chosen names?" David asked. "Marcus and I picked out names months ago," Sarah replied. "This is Antonio, and that's Gabriel." She pointed to each baby as she said their names. "Antonio for my grandfather, and Gabriel for Marcus's father." "Those are wonderful names," David said softly. The neonatal team began preparing to move the babies to the NICU, and Sarah felt a rush of panic at being separated from them so soon after birth. "How long will they need to stay?" she asked. "It depends on how quickly they adapt," David explained. "Usually anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks for healthy twins at this gestation. We'll know more after the first 24 hours. As the medical team wheeled her sons out of the room, Sarah felt more alone than she had at any point during the entire labor and delivery. The room suddenly seemed too quiet, too empty. David was finishing up his paperwork at the bedside table, and Kelly was cleaning up the delivery equipment. Sarah's phone rang, and she grabbed it eagerly, hoping it was Marcus with news about his travel situation. "Sarah? Thank God you're answering. Are you okay? Did you have the babies?" Marcus's voice was frantic with worry. "I'm okay," Sarah said, tears starting to flow again. "The babies were born about an hour ago. 2 boys, Antonio and Gabriel. They're in the NICU for monitoring, but the doctor says they look healthy." "2 boys," Marcus repeated, and she could hear the joy and relief in his voice even through the phone static. "I can't believe I missed it. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm at the Denver airport now, and there's a flight leaving in 3 hours. I should be there by morning." "It's okay," Sarah said, though part of her wished desperately that he had been there to share the experience. "I know you tried everything to get here. How was the delivery? Were the doctors and nurses good to you?" Sarah glanced over at David, who was pretending not to listen to her conversation but was obviously still within earshot. "It was intense, but everyone took good care of me. The doctor was very professional and skilled." That was certainly true, even if it didn't begin to capture the emotional complexity of the situation. "I love you so much," Marcus said. "I can't wait to see you and meet our sons. Get some rest, and I'll be there as soon as I possibly can." After hanging up, Sarah lay back against the pillows, physically and emotionally exhausted. The room was finally quiet except for the soft beeping of her monitoring equipment. Kelly had left to check on other patients, and David was finishing his notes. Marcus will be here in the morning, Sarah said, feeling like she needed to fill the silence. That's good, David replied without looking up from his clipboard. You'll want his support for the next few days while the babies are in the NICU. There was another long pause. Sarah found herself studying David's profile as he worked, remembering all the nights they had spent together during their relationship, planning their future, and dreaming about the life they would build together. She had imagined having children with him once, long ago, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined this scenario. David, she began hesitantly. He looked up from his notes, and for a moment the professional mask slipped, showing something more personal underneath. I know this is complicated, she continued, and I don't want to make things awkward for you professionally, but I wanted you to know that I'm grateful it was you. I was terrified when I realized I was going to deliver alone, but knowing that my babies were in capable hands, it meant a lot. David set down his clipboard and moved closer to her bed. Sarah, I want you to know that I would never let our personal history affect the medical care you received. You and your sons were my patients, and that's all that mattered in this room. I know that, Sarah said quickly. You were completely professional. I just meant. She trailed off, not sure how to express what she was feeling. Relief? Gratitude? Confusion? All of the above? I understand, David said gently. And, for what it's worth, I'm honored that I got to be part of bringing Antonio and Gabriel into the world. They're lucky to have you as their mother. The compliment brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. She was overwhelmed by hormones, exhaustion, and the surreal nature of the entire experience. David seemed to recognize that she was on the verge of an emotional breakdown. You've been through a lot tonight. Try to get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning, and we can discuss the boys' progress and when you might be able to go home. Will you be their doctor while they're here? Sarah asked. I'm the attending physician for now, so yes, I'll be overseeing their care along with the neonatal team. But if that makes you uncomfortable, I can arrange for another doctor to take over. Sarah considered this. Part of her thought it might be easier to have someone else handle their care, to avoid the complications of their shared history. But another part of her felt reassured by the idea that David, whom she knew to be a skilled and caring doctor, would be looking after her sons. I think I'd prefer for you to continue as their doctor, she said finally. You're clearly good at what you do, and I trust you. David nodded. Then, I'll continue to be their primary physician. I'll make sure you're kept informed about everything, and I'll answer any questions you or Marcus have. He gathered his clipboard and headed toward the door, then paused and turned back. Sarah, congratulations. Really, you did something amazing tonight, and you have two beautiful, healthy sons because of your strength and determination. After he left, Sarah lay in the quiet room, staring at the ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. 6 hours ago, she had been a pregnant woman dealing with what she thought was false labor. Now she was the mother of twin boys, and her ex-boyfriend was their doctor. Life, she reflected, had a very strange sense of timing. Kelly returned to check on her and help her get cleaned up and into a fresh gown. How are you feeling, Han? Exhausted, overwhelmed, happy, confused, Sarah listed. Pretty much every emotion at once. Kelly laughed. That sounds about right for someone who just delivered twins. It's a lot to process, even under the best circumstances. Can you tell me more about what to expect with the NICU stay? Sarah asked. Dr. Chun will give you all the medical details, but I can tell you that our NICU is excellent. The nurses there are specialists in caring for premature and early-term babies. You'll be able to visit whenever you want, and they'll teach you how to care for twins who need a little extra help initially. Will I be able to hold them? Probably not right away, but soon. They need to stabilize first and make sure their breathing and temperature are well regulated. But within a day or two, you should be able to have skin-to-skin contact, which is wonderful for both babies and mothers. Sarah woke to the sound of her hospital room door opening. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and she felt disoriented for a moment before the events of the previous night came flooding back. She had given birth to twins. David had been her doctor. Marcus was supposed to arrive this morning. Good morning, sweetheart, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Marcus stood there with dark circles under his eyes, still wearing the wrinkled business suit he had traveled in. His usually neat brown hair was disheveled, and he looked like he hadn't slept in 24 hours. "Marcus," Sarah's voice broke with relief and emotion. He crossed the room quickly and pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her post-delivery condition. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here," he whispered into her hair. "I tried everything to get an earlier flight, but the storm system grounded everything out of Denver." "It's okay," Sarah said, though tears were streaming down her face. "You're here now, and that's what matters." Marcus pulled back to look at her face. "How are you? Are you in pain? And the babies, are they okay?" "I'm sore but fine." "The babies?" Sarah paused, not sure how to explain the complex mix of emotions she was feeling about their sons being in the NICU. "They're in the neonatal intensive care unit. They were born early, so they need some extra monitoring and help with feeding. But the doctor says they look healthy for 36 weeks. Can I see them?" Marcus asked immediately. "Of course. I haven't been up there yet this morning. But we can go together as soon as I get cleaned up and have breakfast." A soft knock on the door interrupted their reunion. David stepped into the room, wearing fresh scrubs and carrying a tablet computer. His expression was professionally neutral, but Sarah noticed he took in the scene quickly, Marcus holding her hand, the obvious intimacy of their reunion. "Good morning, Sarah," David said politely. "I'm Dr. Chun. You must be Marcus." Marcus stood up and extended his hand. "Yes, thank you so much for taking care of my wife and sons. I'm sorry I wasn't here for the delivery." David shook his hand firmly. "Your wife did beautifully. She was incredibly brave throughout the entire process." Sarah watched this interaction with fascination and discomfort. Here was her husband meeting her ex-boyfriend, with neither of them knowing about their shared history. She had never told Marcus about David, not because she was trying to hide anything, but because their relationship had ended so long ago that it hadn't seemed relevant to her new life. "How are Antonio and Gabriel doing?" Sarah asked, eager to shift the focus away from the personal dynamics in the room. David consulted his tablet. "They had a good night. Both boys are breathing on their own without assistance, which is excellent. Their blood sugar levels have stabilized, and they're maintaining their body temperature well. We'll be able to try feeding them later today." "When can we see them?" Marcus asked. "Anytime you'd like. The NICU has open visiting hours for parents. I'd recommend going up after Sarah has had some breakfast and feels ready to be out of bed for a while." David went over the medical details of their care, explaining the monitors they were attached to and what the various numbers meant. Marcus asked intelligent questions about their development and prognosis, and Sarah could see that he was trying to process the reality of becoming a father to premature twins. "How long do you think they'll need to stay?" Sarah asked. "If they continue progressing as well as they have been, probably about a week, maybe 2 at the most," David replied. "We'll be watching for them to consistently maintain their temperature, take full feedings, and continue gaining weight." After David left to continue his rounds, Marcus sat back down beside Sarah's bed. "He seems like a good doctor." "Yes, he is," Sarah agreed, hoping her voice sounded normal. "What was it like, going through labor alone?" Marcus asked gently. "I keep imagining how scared you must have been." Sarah considered how to answer. The truth was that seeing David had added an entirely different layer of complexity to an already overwhelming experience. But she couldn't explain that without revealing their history. "It was frightening at first," she said honestly. "But the nursing staff was wonderful, and Dr. Chun made me feel confident that everything would be okay. I kept thinking about you and wishing you were there. But I also knew that the most important thing was getting the babies delivered safely." Marcus squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you. I can't believe you handled all of that by yourself." A nurse came in with Sarah's breakfast tray and helped her sit up more comfortably in bed. The simple act of eating reminded her that her body had been through a major physical experience and needed fuel to recover. "Are you ready to meet your sons?" she asked Marcus after finishing most of her breakfast. His face lit up with excitement and nervousness. "I've been ready for 8 months." Getting to the NICU required Sarah to use a wheelchair, which made her feel more like an invalid than she wanted to. But she was grateful for the assistance when she realized how weak and shaky she still felt. The combination of physical exhaustion and the emotional intensity of the last 12 hours had taken more of a toll than she had realized. The NICU was a world unto itself. The lighting was dimmer than the rest of the hospital, and the sounds were different. Soft beeping from multiple monitors, the gentle whoosh of ventilators, and the quiet voices of nurses speaking to tiny patients. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the medical equipment and the obvious frailty of some of the babies they passed on the way to their son's isolettes. "Here they are," announced Jennifer, one of the NICU nurses. "Your little guys have been doing great." Antonio and Gabriel were in separate clear plastic bassinets called isolettes, positioned side by side. They looked so small surrounded by all the medical equipment, but Sarah was relieved to see that they were both breathing on their own. They had monitors attached to their chests and tiny 4 lines in their arms, but overall they looked much healthier than she had feared. Marcus stood frozen beside the first isolette, staring down at Antonio with wonder. "He's so small," he whispered. "Actually, he's a good size for 36 weeks, Jennifer said encouragingly. 4 pounds, 8 ounces. Gabriel is a bit smaller at 4 pounds even, but still within normal range for twins at this gestation." "Can we touch them?" Sarah asked. "Absolutely. You can reach through the openings in the isolettes and hold their hands or stroke their heads. They'll find your touch very comforting." Sarah carefully reached through the opening and gently stroked Gabriel's tiny cheek with one finger. His skin was incredibly soft, and she could see his chest rising and falling steadily. At her touch, he turned his head slightly and made a small sound. "He knows you're here," Jennifer said with a smile. Babies recognize their mother's voice and touch immediately. Marcus was having his first moment of skin-to-skin contact with Antonio, and Sarah could see tears in her husband's eyes. "Hello, little guy," he said softly. "I'm your daddy. I'm sorry I missed your big entrance into the world." They spent an hour in the NICU, taking turns touching and talking to each baby. Jennifer explained their feeding schedule, their medication regimen, and what milestones they would need to reach before going home. It was a lot of information to absorb, but Sarah felt more hopeful with each update. Her sons were fighters, and they were getting stronger every hour. "Dr. Chun will be by later this morning to check on them," Jennifer mentioned as they prepared to leave. "He's been very attentive to their care. You're lucky to have him as their physician." Back in her room, Sarah and Marcus spent time calling family members to share the news of the baby's birth. Sarah's mother was booking a flight to come help once the babies were discharged. Marcus's parents were making plans to drive up from San Antonio. Everyone was excited but also concerned about the NICU stay. "I should probably call my office and let them know I'll be taking extended paternity leave," Marcus said. "Originally I had planned for 2 weeks, but with the babies needing extra care, I think I should plan for a month." "That would be wonderful," Sarah agreed. "I'm going to need help figuring out how to care for 2 babies who might have ongoing medical needs." Dr. Williams, Sarah's regular obstetrician, stopped by late in the morning to check on her recovery and discuss the circumstances that led to the early delivery. She was pleased with Sarah's physical condition and explained that twin pregnancies often resulted in earlier delivery, especially for first-time mothers. "You'll need to take it easy for the next few weeks," Dr. Williams advised. "Your body has been through a lot, and you'll need to build up your strength gradually. Plus, having babies in the NICU is emotionally draining, so don't underestimate the psychological recovery you'll need as well." Around noon, David stopped by to give them an update on the baby's progress. Both boys had successfully taken small amounts of formula through feeding tubes, and their vital signs remained stable. "We're going to try bottle feeding later today," he explained. "Premature babies sometimes have trouble coordinating sucking, swallowing, and breathing, but your boys are showing good reflexes." "What happens if they can't bottle feed?" Marcus asked. "Then, we continue with tube feeding until they develop the coordination," David replied. "It's not uncommon, and it doesn't indicate any long-term problems. Some babies just need a little more time to develop that skill." Sarah found herself studying David's interactions with Marcus. He was completely professional and informative, showing no sign that he had any personal connection to their family. She wondered if this was difficult for him, or if enough time had passed that seeing her with another man didn't affect him emotionally. "I wanted to discuss Sarah's discharge timeline," David continued. "Typically, We like to keep mothers for 48 hours after delivery, which would mean you could go home tomorrow evening. However, since the babies will be staying longer, we can extend your stay for a few extra days if you'd prefer to remain close to them. I'd like to stay, Sarah said immediately. I can't imagine going home while they're still here. I think that's wise, Marcus agreed. I'll stay in the room with you if that's possible. David nodded. We can arrange for a cot to be brought in. Many parents of NICU babies find it helpful to stay nearby during the initial period. That afternoon, Sarah was able to walk to the NICU on her own, feeling stronger and more stable. She and Marcus took turns holding Antonio and Gabriel for short periods, enjoying the precious skin-to-skin contact. The baby seemed more alert and responsive, and Sarah felt her maternal instincts kicking in as she learned to interpret their different cries and movements. They have very different personalities already, she observed to Marcus as she held Gabriel. Antonio seems more laid back, while Gabriel appears more alert and active. I was thinking the same thing, Marcus agreed. Antonio just seems to go with the flow, while Gabriel acts like he has places to be and people to see. Jennifer, the NICU nurse, laughed at their observations. You're absolutely right, and it's amazing how early those personality differences show up. We've noticed the same things about your boys. As evening approached, Sarah realized she hadn't seen David for several hours. She found herself wondering if he was intentionally avoiding unnecessary contact with them, or if he was simply busy with other patients. Part of her wanted to talk to him privately, to acknowledge the strangeness of their situation and perhaps get some closure on their past relationship. But another part of her thought it was better to leave things as they were and focus on moving forward. Marcus had gone to the cafeteria to get dinner for both of them when David appeared in her doorway. Hi, he said quietly. I wanted to check on how you're feeling physically before I finish my shift. I'm doing well, Sarah replied. Sore, but much stronger than this morning. David nodded and made some notes in her chart. Your recovery is progressing normally. The babies are both doing beautifully as well. Antonio took nearly a full bottle this evening, and Gabriel managed about half of his feeding before getting tired. That's wonderful news, Sarah said with genuine joy. David finished his notes and seemed ready to leave, but then hesitated at the door. Sarah, I hope you know that I would never compromise the quality of care your sons receive because of our history. They are my patients, and their well-being is my only concern. I never doubted that, Sarah said softly. You were always dedicated to your work, sometimes to the exclusion of everything else. The comment hung in the air between them, loaded with the weight of their shared past. David had chosen his medical career over their relationship, working endless hours during his residency, and ultimately deciding that he couldn't maintain both a demanding medical training program and a serious relationship. You're right, David said after a long pause. I thought I had to choose between medicine and everything else. I'm not sure I made the right choice. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. This was the most personal thing he had said since walking into her delivery room the night before. David, she began, but was interrupted by Marcus returning with their dinner. Oh, hi Dr. Chun, Marcus said, setting down the tray of food. How are the boys doing? Very well, David replied, immediately shifting back to his professional demeanor. I was just updating Sarah on their feeding progress. I'll check on them again in the morning. After he left, Marcus sat down beside her bed with their dinner. He really seems to care about the babies. I feel like we're in good hands with him. Yes, Sarah agreed, though her mind was still replaying David's unexpected moment of personal revelation. He's very thorough. They ate their dinner while discussing logistics for the coming days. Marcus would need to go home at some point to get clothes and personal items for their extended hospital stay. Sarah's mother was arriving tomorrow afternoon and would need to be picked up from the airport. There were car seats to install and a nursery to finish preparing at home. It's strange, Sarah mused. We spent months planning for their arrival, but we never really planned for this scenario, having them born early and staying in the hospital for weeks. We'll figure it out as we go, Marcus said reassuringly. The important thing is that they're healthy and growing stronger every day. That evening, they made their final visit to the NICU before trying to get some sleep. Both babies were resting peacefully, looking slightly bigger and stronger than they had that morning. Sarah found herself memorizing their faces, the way Antonio's hair stuck up in the back, and how Gabriel had a small birthmark on his left shoulder. "Good night, my little loves," she whispered to each of them. "We'll see you first thing in the morning." Back in her room, Marcus had arranged the extra cot beside her bed so they could sleep close to each other. It wasn't comfortable, but Sarah was grateful for his presence after spending the previous night alone. "I keep thinking about everything that happened while I was stuck in that airport," Marcus said in the darkness. "You went through all of that by yourself, and I hate that I missed it." "You couldn't control the weather," Sarah reminded him. "And, honestly, it all happened so fast that I'm not sure there would have been time for you to get here even if you had been on an earlier flight. Still, I feel like I failed you somehow. Like I should have anticipated this and been more prepared." Sarah reached over to take his hand. "Marcus, you didn't fail me. You tried everything you could to get here. And the babies are healthy and beautiful, which is all that really matters." But, as she tried to fall asleep, Sarah found her mind wandering to David's comment about not being sure he had made the right choice years ago. What had he meant by that? Was he referring specifically to choosing his career over their relationship, or was it a more general statement about the path his life had taken? She thought about the man she had fallen in love with 8 years ago. David had been passionate about medicine, but also funny and romantic. He used to bring her flowers for no reason and write little notes that he would leave in her textbooks. He had talked about the family they would have someday, the house they would buy, the life they would build together. But, as his residency became more demanding, those romantic gestures became less frequent. Their dates were often canceled due to hospital emergencies, and when they did spend time together, David was usually exhausted or distracted. Eventually, their conversations became dominated by his stress about work, and Sarah began to feel like she was competing with the hospital for his attention. The final conversation of their relationship had been painful, but honest. David had told her that he couldn't give her the attention and commitment she deserved while trying to establish his medical career. He thought it would be unfair to ask her to wait for some undefined future when his schedule might become more manageable. Sarah had been heartbroken but had eventually come to see the wisdom in his decision. She had met Marcus 2 years later, and their relationship had been much more balanced from the beginning. Marcus was an engineer who worked regular hours and made their relationship a priority. He was steady and reliable in ways that David had never been able to be during his medical training. But now, seeing David as a confident, established physician, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what their relationship might have been like if they had found a way to make it work through those difficult early years of his career. These thoughts made her feel guilty. She was happily married to Marcus, and they had just become parents together. It wasn't fair to either of them for her to be having nostalgic thoughts about an old boyfriend, regardless of the unusual circumstances that had brought David back into her life. She forced herself to focus on the present moment. Tomorrow she would see her sons again, continue learning how to care for them, and begin the process of bringing them home. Marcus was being wonderfully supportive, and her mother would arrive to help them adjust to being parents of twins. 3 days had passed since the twins' birth, and Sarah was beginning to feel more confident in her role as their mother. She and Marcus had established a routine of spending most of their waking hours in the NICU, taking turns holding Antonio and Gabriel, learning to change their tiny diapers, and gradually taking on more of their care under the watchful supervision of the nursing staff. Sarah's mother, Elena, had arrived the previous afternoon and immediately thrown herself into the role of devoted grandmother. She had brought homemade food from home, practical supplies that Sarah and Marcus hadn't thought to pack, and an endless supply of energy and optimism that helped lift everyone's spirits. "Mija, these babies are strong like their mama," Elena declared as she watched Sarah successfully bottle feed Gabriel his entire meal without assistance. "Look how well he's eating now. They'll be home before you know it." Sarah smiled at her mother's confidence, though she was learning not to get ahead of herself. The NICU experience was teaching her to celebrate small victories while remaining patient about the bigger picture. Today, Gabriel had taken a full feeding. Tomorrow, he might be too tired to finish even half a bottle. The progress wasn't always linear, but the overall trend was positive. Marcus had gone home that morning to shower, pick up more clothes for their extended stay, and handle some urgent work matters that couldn't be postponed any longer. Sarah was grateful for Elena's presence during his absence, not just for the practical help, but for the emotional support of having another woman who understood the intensity of new motherhood. Dr. Chun has been wonderful, Elena observed as they watched Antonio sleep peacefully in his isolette. Very thorough with his explanations, and you can tell he genuinely cares about the baby's well-being. Sarah nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. She still hadn't told her mother or Marcus about her history with David, and she was beginning to wonder if that had been the right decision. The secret felt heavier each day, especially as David continued to be such a significant presence in their daily lives as the baby's primary physician. Has he mentioned when they might be able to come home? Elena asked. He's been cautiously optimistic about this weekend, but it depends on whether they can consistently maintain their weight and take all their feedings by bottle, Sarah explained. Gabriel still gets tired during some feedings, so he might need a few extra days. As if summoned by their conversation, David appeared at the entrance to their section of the NICU. He was making his afternoon rounds, checking on each of his tiny patients and consulting with the nursing staff about their progress. Good afternoon, Sarah, Mrs. He extended his hand to Elena with a polite smile. Morales. Elena Morales. I'm Sarah's mother, Elena replied, shaking his hand firmly. Thank you so much for taking such good care of my grandsons. They're remarkable babies, David said warmly. You should be very proud of how well they're adapting to life outside the womb. He consulted his tablet and reviewed the twins' latest vital signs and feeding records. Antonio continues to exceed all our expectations. His weight gain has been steady, and he's taking his bottles without any issues. Gabriel is doing well too, though he's still showing some fatigue during feedings. What does that mean for their discharge timeline? Sarah asked. I think Antonio could potentially go home this weekend if he continues progressing as he has been, David said. Gabriel might need a few extra days, but hopefully not more than that. The prospect of taking one baby home while leaving the other in the hospital filled Sarah with conflicting emotions. She wanted them both to be healthy enough to leave, but the idea of separating the twins, even temporarily, seemed wrong somehow. Is it common for twins to be discharged at different times? Elena asked, voicing the concern Sarah hadn't known how to express. It happens sometimes, David explained. Each baby develops at their own pace, and we have to make discharge decisions based on individual readiness rather than trying to keep them together. But, in Gabriel's case, I think it's just a matter of a few extra days of maturity. His overall health is excellent. After David continued his rounds, Elena sat down in the chair beside Gabriel's isolette. It must be hard for Dr. Chun to see families go through this every day, she observed. He seems very invested in his patients' well-being, but this kind of work must take an emotional toll. Sarah wondered about that too. Did David go home at night thinking about the babies in his care? Did he worry about them the way she did? She remembered that he had always been emotionally invested in his work, sometimes to an extent that concerned her during their relationship. He mentioned that he's not married. Elena continued conversationally. I asked him about his family when we were talking earlier. Said he's too focused on his work to have settled down yet. It's a shame. He seems like he would make a wonderful father himself. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sadness at this information, though she wasn't sure why. She had moved on from their relationship years ago and built a happy life with Marcus. David's personal choices shouldn't affect her emotions one way or the other. Some people are just more focused on their careers, Sarah replied, trying to sound casual. Marcus returned that evening with updates from the outside world. He had stopped by their house to check on things and had been amazed by how much work remained to be done in the nursery they had set up for the twins. I realized we never really prepared for the possibility that they might have different needs when they come home, he told Sarah as they shared dinner in her hospital room. What if Gabriel needs special feeding equipment or monitoring? Should we set up separate cribs or keep them together? These were practical questions that Sarah hadn't considered during the intensity of the past few days. She had been so focused on the immediate medical concerns that she hadn't thought ahead to the logistics of caring for the twins at home, especially if they had different developmental timelines. We should ask Dr. Chin about that tomorrow, she suggested. He'll know what kind of equipment or special care Gabriel might need if he's discharged a few days after Antonio. Good idea. I also need to figure out the pediatrician situation. Dr. Williams gave me a list of recommended doctors for the baby's ongoing care, but I wasn't sure if they would need someone who specializes in premature infant care. Sarah appreciated Marcus's practical approach to planning ahead, but she also felt overwhelmed by all the decisions they needed to make. Becoming a parent to one baby would have been challenging enough. Becoming parents to twins with different medical needs felt almost impossibly complex. That night, as they settled into their now familiar routine of sleeping in her hospital room, Sarah found herself thinking about the conversation with her mother about David's personal life. She wondered if his dedication to his work had cost him other relationships beyond their own. Had he made a conscious choice to prioritize his career over personal commitments? Or had it just worked out that way? She also found herself thinking about what their life might have looked like if they had stayed together. Would she have been supportive enough of his demanding career? Would he have learned to balance work and family better over time? These questions felt dangerous to contemplate, but she couldn't seem to stop her mind from wandering in that direction. The next morning brought encouraging news about Gabriel's progress. He had successfully completed all his overnight feedings without assistance, and his weight had increased to 4 pounds, 4 ounces. "This is exactly the kind of progress we like to see," David told them during his morning visit. "If he continues like this for another 24 hours, I think we can start talking seriously about discharge planning for both boys." Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. Bringing the babies home would be wonderful, but it also meant leaving the safety net of the NICU's round-the-clock medical supervision. "What should we expect in terms of ongoing care?" Marcus asked. "Will they need special monitoring or follow-up appointments?" "They'll need more frequent pediatrician visits initially, just to monitor their weight gain and development," David explained. "But assuming they continue progressing well, they should be able to live normal, healthy lives. Some premature babies have ongoing issues with things like respiratory function or feeding, but your boys are showing no signs of those complications." "What about their development milestones?" Elena asked. "Will they reach things like sitting up and walking at the same time as full-term babies?" David smiled at the question. "We typically adjust developmental expectations based on their corrected age, so we count their development from their due date rather than their birth date. That means they'll probably reach milestones a few weeks later than babies born at full term, but that's completely normal and expected." After David left to continue his rounds, Sarah felt ready to address some of the practical questions about bringing the babies home. She and Marcus spent the morning making lists of supplies they would need, calling pediatricians to schedule initial appointments, and researching car seat safety for premature infants. "I keep thinking we should have been more prepared for this scenario," Marcus said as they worked through their to-do list. "I feel like we planned for the birth, but not for the reality of caring for twins who might have special needs." "I don't think anyone can really prepare for this," Sarah replied. "We've learned more about premature infant care in the past 4 days than I thought was possible. We'll figure out the rest as we go." That afternoon, Sarah was alone with the babies while Marcus and Elena went to shop for some additional supplies they would need at home. She was practicing giving Gabriel a bottle feeding when David stopped by for an unscheduled check on his progress. "How's he doing with this feeding?" David asked, observing Gabriel's technique. "Much better than yesterday," Sarah reported. "He's taken almost the whole bottle without getting too tired." David made notes in his chart and then sat down in the chair beside the isolette. For a moment, they were quiet except for the soft sounds of Gabriel nursing and the gentle beeping of monitors throughout the NICU. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" David said finally, his voice more personal than professional. She looked up from the baby, surprised by the change in his tone. "Of course. Are you happy? With your life, your marriage, everything?" The question caught her completely off guard. "What do you mean?" Seeing you become a mother, watching you with Marcus and your family. It's clear that you've built a beautiful life. I wanted to know if it's everything you hoped it would be." Sarah studied his face, trying to understand what was behind the question. "Yes, I'm very happy. Marcus is a wonderful husband, and becoming a mother to Antonio and Gabriel has been incredible, even under these circumstances." David nodded, though she couldn't read his expression. "I'm glad. You deserve that happiness." "David, why are you asking me this?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching Gabriel continue his feeding. "I think seeing you again has made me realize some things about the choices I've made. When we broke up, I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing for both of us, that you would be better off with someone who could give you the attention and stability you deserved. Sarah felt her heart rate accelerate. This conversation was moving into territory that felt dangerous given their current circumstances. You did what you thought was best at the time, she said carefully. But what if I was wrong? David asked quietly. What if I was just scared of trying to balance everything? And I took the easy way out by choosing one priority over all others. Gabriel finished his bottle, and Sarah automatically shifted him to her shoulder to burp him, grateful for the distraction of caring for the baby while processing what David had just said. David, we can't go back and change the past, she said finally. And even if we could, I'm not sure it would be wise to do so. We were both different people then, with different needs and priorities. You're right, David agreed. I just wanted you to know that seeing you with your sons, seeing what an amazing mother you've become, it's made me proud and sad at the same time. Proud because you've achieved everything you wanted, and sad because I wasn't mature enough to be part of that journey with you. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. This conversation was bringing up emotions she had thought were long buried, and it was happening at a time when she was already feeling vulnerable and overwhelmed. David, you've been an incredible doctor to my sons. You helped bring them safely into the world, and you've taken excellent care of them during this critical time. That means more to me than you know. But, he prompted, sensing that she had more to say. But, I'm married now. I have a family with Marcus, and we're happy together. Whatever might have been between us in a different time or under different circumstances, it's not relevant to who we are now. David nodded slowly. I understand. And I want you to know that I would never do anything to jeopardize your happiness or your family. I just needed to say what I was feeling. Gabriel had fallen asleep against her shoulder, and Sarah gently placed him back in his isolette. The simple act of caring for her son helped ground her in the present moment and remind her of what truly mattered. Thank you for being honest, she said to David. But I think it's best if we keep our interactions focused on the medical care of the babies. Of course, David agreed immediately. You have my word that my personal feelings won't interfere with their care or your family's comfort. As David left to continue his rounds, Sarah felt emotionally drained. The conversation had been unexpected and intense, forcing her to confront feelings and memories she had been trying to keep buried since the night of the delivery. She realized that she needed to tell Marcus about her history with David. Keeping it secret had seemed like the right decision initially, but David's personal revelations made it feel dishonest to continue hiding their past relationship. Marcus deserved to know why their interactions with the baby's doctor might be more complicated than they appeared on the surface. When Marcus and Elena returned from their shopping trip, Sarah asked her mother to give them some privacy to talk. Is everything okay? Marcus asked immediately, sensing her serious mood. Are the babies all right? The babies are fine, Sarah assured him quickly. But there's something I need to tell you about Dr. Chun. Marcus sat down beside her bed, his expression concerned. What about him? Sarah took a deep breath. David and I used to date. We were in a serious relationship about 6 years ago, before I met you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing this information. How serious? We lived together for about 2 years. We talked about getting married, but ultimately he chose to focus on his medical career instead. We broke up, and I didn't see him again until the night I went into labor. So when you said the doctor was professional and skilled, Marcus began. I meant it, Sarah said firmly. But it was also incredibly strange and emotional to have him be the one delivering our children. I should have told you right away, but everything was happening so fast. And then you were here and meeting him, and it just became harder to bring up. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the hospital courtyard. Sarah waited nervously for his response, not sure how he would react to learning that she had kept this information from him for several days. Did anything happen between you two while I was trying to get here? He asked finally. No, absolutely not, Sarah said immediately. He was completely professional throughout the delivery and afterward. But today he said some things about regretting how our relationship ended, and I realized I needed to tell you the truth about our history. Marcus turned back to face her. What kind of things? Sarah hesitated, not wanting to hurt Marcus, but knowing that honesty was the only way forward. He said that seeing me as a mother made him realize he might have made the wrong choice years ago in choosing his career over our relationship. Marcus was quiet for a long time, and Sarah could see him working through the implications of what she had told him. "How do you feel about seeing him again?" he asked finally. "Confused," Sarah admitted. "It's brought up a lot of memories and emotions that I thought I had resolved. But, Marcus, I want you to know that my feelings about our marriage and our family haven't changed. You are my husband, and Antonio and Gabriel are our sons. Whatever David and I had in the past, it's over." Marcus sat back down beside her and took her hands in his. "I appreciate you telling me the truth, even though it was difficult. I wish you had told me earlier, but I understand why you didn't." "Are you angry?" Sarah asked quietly. "I'm not angry, but I am concerned about how this affects our family going forward. He's still the baby's doctor, and we'll be interacting with him regularly until they're discharged." Sarah nodded. "I told him that we need to keep our interactions focused purely on medical matters." He agreed and promised that his personal feelings wouldn't interfere with the baby's care. "Do you trust him to stick to that?" Marcus asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Yes, I do. David has always been professional in his work, and he would never compromise patient care. But if you're not comfortable with him continuing as their doctor, we could request someone else." Marcus thought about this for a moment. "I don't think that's necessary unless his care becomes compromised. The babies are doing well under his supervision, and changing doctors at this point could be disruptive. But I want you to promise me that you'll tell me immediately if he makes you uncomfortable or crosses any boundaries." "I promise," Sarah said with relief. She was grateful that Marcus was being understanding about the situation, even though she knew it must be difficult for him to process. Elena returned to the room shortly after their conversation, sensing that the serious discussion was over. She had brought coffee and pastries from the hospital cafe, and her cheerful presence helped shift the mood to something more normal. That evening, as they made their usual visit to see the babies before bedtime, Sarah noticed that Marcus was quieter than usual. She wondered if he was thinking about her conversation with David, or if he was feeling differently about the doctor who would be responsible for bringing their sons home. David stopped by during their visit to give them an update on discharge planning. Both babies had continued to progress well, and he was optimistic that they could both go home within the next 48 hours. "I want to see them both take several SUC." The morning of their potential discharge day arrived with a mixture of excitement and anxiety that Sarah had never experienced before. After 6 days in the NICU, both Antonio and Gabriel had met all the medical criteria for going home. They were maintaining their body temperature, taking full bottle feedings consistently, gaining weight steadily, and showing no signs of respiratory distress. Sarah stood beside their isolettes, watching them sleep peacefully, and found it hard to believe that these tiny beings who had been surrounded by medical equipment and round-the-clock nursing care would soon be entirely dependent on her and Marcus for their survival and well-being. "Ready for the big day?" Jennifer, their favorite NICU nurse, asked as she approached with the morning medication schedule. "I think so," Sarah replied, though her voice betrayed her nervousness. "It feels surreal that they're actually coming home today." "You've learned so much over the past week," Jennifer reassured her. "You and Marcus are more prepared than most new parents, especially considering you've been caring for twins who needed extra attention. Trust yourselves." Marcus was at home, making final preparations to bring the babies home. He was installing car seats that were specifically designed for premature infants, setting up the nursery with the additional equipment they had purchased for monitoring the twins' progress, and preparing the house for the arrival of their sons. Elena was with Sarah at the hospital, helping her pack up the accumulated belongings from their week-long stay and providing moral support as they waited for David's final medical clearance. "Mija, you look nervous," Elena observed as Sarah compulsively reorganized the diaper bag for the third time that morning. "I am nervous," Sarah admitted. "In here, there are always nurses and doctors nearby if something goes wrong. At home, it's just Marcus and me. What if something happens and we don't know what to do?" Elena sat down beside her daughter and took her hands gently. "Do you remember when you were a baby and I brought you home from the hospital? I was terrified too. I had never taken care of a baby before, and suddenly, I was responsible for this tiny person who couldn't tell me what she needed. How did you manage? Sarah asked. I learned by doing, just like every mother before me and every mother since. You have good instincts, Sarah, and you've already proven that during this week in the NICU. Plus, you have Marcus, who is going to be a wonderful father, and you have me to help for as long as you need. David arrived for his final examination of the twins, accompanied by a resident doctor whom he was training in neonatal care. Sarah noted that his manner was completely professional, showing no trace of the personal conversation they had shared 2 days earlier. Let's take a look at these boys and see if they're ready to graduate from our NICU, he said with a warm smile. The examination was thorough but routine. Both babies were weighed again, their reflexes were tested, and David listened carefully to their hearts and lungs. Gabriel, who had been the slower to develop feeding stamina, took a full bottle during the examination without showing any signs of fatigue. I'm very pleased with their progress, David announced after completing his assessment. Both boys are medically cleared for discharge. They've exceeded all our expectations for 36-week twins. Sarah felt a surge of pride and relief. Her sons had been fighters from the beginning, and they were continuing to prove their resilience and strength. What should we watch for at home? Sarah asked, pulling out the notebook where she had been recording all the medical information and advice they had received. The usual things that any new parent should monitor, David explained. Make sure they're eating well, having regular wet and dirty diapers, and maintaining good color. Since they were premature, you'll want to be extra vigilant about their temperature regulation for the first few weeks. He handed Sarah a detailed discharge instruction sheet that covered everything from feeding schedules to when to call their pediatrician. Dr. Martinez will be their primary care physician going forward, and I've already sent her all their medical records from their NICU stay. Will we see you again for follow-up appointments? Elena asked. Not routinely, David replied. Dr. Martinez will handle their ongoing care, but I'm always available if any complications arise that require neonatal expertise. Sarah felt an unexpected pang of sadness at the thought that this might be the last time she saw David professionally. Despite the emotional complications of their history, she had felt reassured by his presence during this critical time in her sons' lives. Marcus arrived at the hospital just as they were finishing the discharge paperwork. He looked excited but nervous as he surveyed the twins in their car seats, which looked enormous compared to their tiny bodies. Are those car seats really supposed to be that big? He asked uncertainly. Jennifer laughed. They look huge now, but they'll grow into them quickly. The important thing is that they're properly installed and designed for their current weight. The process of actually leaving the hospital took longer than Sarah had anticipated. There were final weight checks, last-minute questions about feeding schedules, and a review of warning signs that should prompt immediate medical attention. By the time they were actually walking out of the NICU with their sons, Sarah felt emotionally and physically exhausted. David accompanied them to the hospital entrance, helping Marcus carry the car seats while Sarah walked slowly beside them, still recovering from delivery and feeling unsteady after 6 days of limited physical activity. Thank you for everything. Marcus says successful feedings tomorrow, and their weight gain needs to stay consistent, he explained. But, assuming everything goes well, we can start talking about discharge procedures. His manner was completely professional, giving no indication of their earlier personal conversation. Sarah was grateful for this, especially with Marcus present. As they walked back to her room after the visit, Marcus took her hand. He does seem like a good doctor, he said quietly. I can see why the babies are doing so well under his care. Sarah squeezed his hand gratefully. Thank you for being so understanding about everything. We're going to be okay, Marcus said firmly. Our family is strong enough to handle this complication. That night, as Sarah lay in the hospital bed with Marcus sleeping on the cot beside her, she felt a sense of resolution about the situation with David. She had been honest with her husband. She had set clear boundaries with David. And, most importantly, her sons were healthy and almost ready to come home. The past few days had been emotionally challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated, but they had also shown her how strong her marriage was and how much she had grown as a person since her relationship with David ended. She was ready to focus completely on her future as a mother and wife, leaving the complications of the past behind her. As for David, he was simply their doctor. Their personal history was just that, history. Whatever feelings or regrets he might have expressed were irrelevant to their current situation. She was committed to her marriage and her family, and she wouldn't allow an old relationship to complicate the joy of becoming a mother. With these resolutions firmly in mind, Sarah finally fell asleep, though her dreams were filled with images from the past and present that her subconscious mind seemed determined to weave together in complicated patterns. The next morning brought new challenges and new hope. Gabriel had successfully taken a full bottle feeding during the night, which was a major milestone. Antonio continued to be the more easygoing of the two, taking his feedings without struggle and sleeping peacefully between meals. They're both exceeding our expectations for 36-week twins, Jennifer told Sarah and Marcus during their morning visit. Dr. Chun is very pleased with their progress. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her son's resilience and strength. They were fighters, just like she had been during that long, intense delivery. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was confident that their little family would face them together. As they prepared for another day of NICU visits and medical updates, Sarah made a silent promise to herself to stay focused on what truly mattered: the health and happiness of Antonio and Gabriel, and the strength of her marriage to Marcus. Everything else was secondary to those priorities. Sarah felt a little better knowing that the separation from her sons wouldn't last too long. She was already missing them intensely, which surprised her given that she had only held them for a few minutes total. Try to get some sleep, Kelly advised. Tomorrow is going to be a big day with visiting the babies and getting used to being a mom of twins. You'll need your energy. After Kelly left, Sarah finally allowed herself to close her eyes and rest. But sleep was elusive. Every time she started to drift off, her mind would replay the events of the evening. The pain of labor, the fear of being alone, the shock of seeing David, the joy of holding her sons, the worry about their health. And underlying it all was the knowledge that this was just the beginning. She would be seeing David regularly for at least the next few weeks while the babies were in his care. She would have to navigate the complex emotions of their shared past while focusing on being the best mother she could be to Antonio and Gabriel. As the first hints of dawn began to filter through the hospital room window, Sarah finally managed to fall asleep, dreaming of tiny hands and dark hair and the sound of her ex-boyfriend's voice sing "It's a Boy" over and over again.